Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Centaur Scrolls Lore, Fire, and Forbidden Text with me, Reverend Mother Mary Catherine. And I'm so happy to be here today. So, we're going to finish up Aradia today for sure. And saying that we should think about what, we might want to do for the next book. I don't know if you guys are into fiction. I only have a few fiction titles available, but I do have a couple of them. One of them I have, excuse me, one of them I have is The Dove Keepers. So if you've seen the movie, but you haven't read the book, then the book is way better. So that being said, leave a comment down below and let me know if you're into a read like The Dove Keepers or if you want to keep it to nonfiction. I don't know if you can call Aradia nonfiction. I kind of do, but hey, whatever. It is or it isn't. I think some of it is fiction and some of it is not. How's that? And so, again, thank you for being here with me. Let's get started. So the appendix is what we're reading today. Comments on the foregoing texts. And I don't know about you guys, but I do tend to read appendix just like a chapter sometimes. And that's kind of how we're going to do this too. And it looks like there's a couple of parts to this. So it's going to be quite a good bit today. So here we go. The appendix, comments on the foregoing texts. So long ago as the year 1886, I learned that there was in existence a manuscript setting forth the doctrines of Italian witchcraft, and I was promised that, if possible, it should be obtained for me. In this I was for a time disappointed, but having urged it on Madalena, my collector of folklore, while she was leading a wandering life in Tuscany, to make an effort to obtain or recover something of the kind, I at last received from her on January 1st, 1897, entitled Aradia, or the Gospel of the Witches. Now, be it observed that every leading point which forms the plot or center of the Vangel, such as that Diana is Queen of the Witches and associate of Aradia, in her relations to sorcery, that she bore a child to her brother, the sun, here Lucifer, that as a moon goddess, she is in some relation to Cain, who dwells as a prisoner in the moon, and that the witches of old were people oppressed by feudal lands, the former revenging themselves in every way and holding orgies to Diana, which the church represented as being the worship of Satan. All of this, I repeat, had been told or written out for me in fragments by Magdalena, not to speak of other authorities, even as it had been chronicled by Horst or Michelet. Therefore, all this is in the present document of minor importance. All of this I expected, but what I did not expect, and what was new to me, was that portion which is given as prose poetry and which I have rendered in meter or verse. This, being traditional and taken down from wizards, is extremely curious and interesting, since in it are preserved many relics of lore which, as may be verified from records, have come down from days of yore. Aradia is evidently enough Herodias, who was regarding in the beginning as associated with Diana as chief of the witches. That was not, as I opine, derived from Herodias of the New Testament, but from an earlier replica of Lilith bearing the same name. It is, in fact, an identification or a twinning of the Aryan and Shemitic queens of heaven, or of night and of sorcery. And it may be that this was known to the earliest myth makers so far back as the 6th century. The worship of Herodias and Diana by witches was commended by a church council in Ancria. Pippernus and other writers have noted the evident identity of Herodias with Lilith. Isis preceded both. Diana is very vigorously, even dramatically, set forth in this poem as the goddess of the god-forsaken and ungodly of thieves, harlots, and, truthfully enough, of the minions of the moon, as Falstaff would have fain had them called. It was recognized in ancient Rome, as it is in modern India, that no human being can be so bad or vile as to have forfeited all right to divine protection of some kind or other, and Diana was this protectress. It may be well to observe here that among all free-thinking philosophers, educated pariahs, and literary or book bohemians, there has ever been a most unorthodox tendency to believe that the faults and errors of humanity are more due, if not altogether due, to the unavoidable causes which we cannot help, as for instance heredity, being born savages or poor, or in vice, or unto bigotry and virtue in excess, or unto inquisitioning, that is to say, when we are so overburdened with innately born sin that our free will cannot set us free from it. And that's the first footnote, but I'm going to wait to read it to the end. It was during the so-called Dark Ages, or from the downfall of the Roman Empire until the 13th century, that the belief that all which was worst in man owed its origin solely to the monstrous abuses and tyranny of the church and state. For then, at every turn in life, the vast majority encountered downright, shameless, palatable iniquity and injustice, with no law for the weak who were without patrons. The perception of this drove vast numbers of discontented into rebellion, as they could not prevail by open warfare. They took their hatred out in the form of secret anarchy, which was, however, intimately blended with superstition and fragments of old tradition. Prominent in this, and naturally enough, was the worship of Diana, the protectress, for the alleged adoration of Satan was a far later invention of the church, and it has never really found a leading place in Italian witchcraft to this day. That is to say, purely diabolical witchcraft did not find general acceptance till the end of the 15th century, when it was, one may almost say, invented in Rome to supply means wherewith to destroy the threatening heresy of Germany. The growth of sentiment is the increase of suffering. Man is never entirely miserable until he finds out how wronged he is and fancies that he sees far ahead a possible freedom. In ancient times, men as slaves suffered less under even more abuse because they believed they were born to low conditions of life. Even the best reform brings pain with it. And the great awakening of man was accompanied with griefs, many of which even yet endure. Pessimism is the result of too much culture and introvision. It appears to be strangely out of sight and out of mind with all historians that the sufferings of the vast majority of mankind, or the enslaved and poor, were far greater under early Christianity or till the end of the Middle Ages and the emancipation of serfs than they were before. The reason for this was that in the old heathen time, the humble did not know or even dream that all are equal before God, or that they had many rights, even here on earth, as slaves. For in fact, the whole moral tendency of the New Testament is utterly opposed to slavery, or even severe servitude. Every word uttered teaching Christ's mercy and love, humility and charity was in fact a bitter reproof, not only to every lord in the land, but to the church itself and its arrogant prelates. The fact that many abuses have been mitigated and that there were benevolent saints does not affect the fact that, on the whole, mankind was for a long time worse off than before. And the greatest cause of this suffering was what may be called a sentimental one, or newly born consciousness of rights withheld, which is always of itself a torture. And this was greatly aggravated by the endless preaching to the people that it was a duty to suffer and endure oppression and tyranny, and that the rights of authority of all kinds were so great that they on the whole even excused their worst abuses, for by upholding authority in the nobility, the church maintained its own. The result of all was a vast development of rebels, outcasts, and all the discounted who adopted witchcraft or sorcery for a religion, and wizards as their priests. And they had sacred meetings in desert places among old ruins, accursed by priests as the haunt of evil spirits or ancient heathen gods, or in the mountains. And to this day, the dweller in Italy may often find secluded spots enjoined by ancient chestnut forests, rocks, and walls, which suggest fit places for the Sabbath, and are sometimes still believed by traditions to be such. And I also believe that in this Gospel of the Witches, we have a trustworthy outline, at least, of the doctrine and rites observed at these meetings. They adored forbidden deities and practiced forbidden deeds, inspired as much by rebellion against society as by their own passions. There is, however, in the Evangel of the Witches, an effort made to distinguish between the naturally wicked or corrupt and those who are outcasts, oppressed, as appears from the passage. Yet like Cain's daughter, offspring thou shalt never be, nor like the race who have become at last wicked and infamous from suffering, as are the Jews and wandering Zingari, who are all thieves, like them ye shall not be. The supper of the witches, the cakes of meal, salt, and honey in the form of crescent moons, are known to every classical scholar. The moon or horn-shaped cakes are still common. I have eaten them to this very day, and though they are known all over the world, I believe they owe their fashion to tradition. In conjuration of the meal, there is a very curious tradition introduced to the effect that the spege, or glittering grains of wheat from which spikes shoot like sun rays, owe their brilliant likeness to a resemblance to the firefly, who comes to give them light. We have, I doubt not, in this a classic tradition, but I cannot verify it. Here upon the Banglo cities, a common nursery rhyme, which may also be found in a nursery tale, yet which, like others, is derived from witch lore, by which the Luciola is put under a glass and conjured to give, by its light, certain answers. The conjuration of the meal or bread as being literally our body, as contributing to form it, and deeply sacred because it had lain in the earth where dark and wondrous secrets bide, seems to cast a new light on the Christian sacrament. It is a type of resurrection from the earth, and was therefore used at the mysteries and Holy Supper. And the grain had pertained to Teutonic secrets, or to what had been under the earth in darkness. This, even earthworms are invoked in modern witchcraft as familiar with dark mysteries. And the shepherd's pipe, to win the Orphic power, must be burned 3 days in the earth. And so all was and is in sorcery a kind of wild poetry based on symbols, all blending into one another: light and darkness, fireflies and grain, life and death. Very strange indeed, but very strictly, according to ancient magic as described by classic authorities, is the threatening Diana in case she will not grant a prayer. This recurs continually in the witch exorcisms or spells. The magus or witch worships the spirit, but claims to have the right drawn from a higher power to compel even the Queen of Earth, Heaven, and Hell to grant the request. Give me what I ask, and thou shalt have honor and offerings. Refuse, and I will vex thee by insult. So Canidia and her kind boasted that they could compel the gods to appear. This is all classic. No one ever heard of a satanic witch invoking or threatening the Trinity, or Christ, or even the angels or saints. In fact, they cannot even compel the devil or his imps to obey. They work entirely by his goodwill as slaves. But in the old Italian lore, the sorcerer or witch is all or nothing, and aims at limitless will or power. Of the ancient beliefs in the virtues of a perforated stone I need not speak, but it is to be remarked that in the invocation the witch goes forth in the earliest morning to seek for verbena or vervain. The ancient Persian magi, or rather their daughters, worshipped the sun as it rose by waving freshly plucked verbena, and here's the footnote number 2, which was one of the 7 most powerful plants in magic. These Persian priestesses were naked while they thus worshipped, nudity being a symbol of truth and sincerity. The extinguishing the lights, nakedness, and the orgy were regarded as symbolic of the body being laid in the ground, the grain being planted or entering into darkness and death to be revived in new forms or regeneration and light. It was the laying aside of daily life. The Gospel of the Witches, as I have given it, is in reality only the initial chapter of the collection of ceremonies, cantrips, incantations, and traditions current in the fraternity or sisterhood, the whole of which are in the main to be found in my Etruscan Roman remains and Florentine legends. I have, it is true, a great number as yet unpublished, and there were more ungathered, but the whole scripture of this sorcery, all its principal tenets, formulas, mediments, and mystery, may be found in what I have collected and printed. Yet I would urge that it would be worthwhile to arrange and edit into into one work, because it would be to every student of archaeology, folklore, or history of great value, and it has been the faith of millions in the past. It has made itself felt in innumerable traditions which deserve to be better understood than they are, and I would gladly undertake the work if I believed that the public would make it worth the publisher's outlay and pains. It may be observed with truth that I have not treated this gospel, nor even the subject of witchcraft, entirely as folklore, as the word is strictly defined and carried out, that is, as a mere traditional fact or thing to be chiefly regarded as a variant like or unlike sundry other traditions, or to be tabulated and put away in pigeonholes for reference. That it is useful and sensible to do all this is perfectly true, and it has led to an immense amount of valuable search, collection, and preservation. But there is also to be said, and I have observed that here and there a few genial minds are beginning to awake to it, that the mere study of the letter in this way has developed a great indifference to the spirit, going in many cases so far as to produce like realism in art, to which is allied even a contempt for the matter or meaning of it as originally believed in. I was lately much struck, by the fact that every learned work on music, the author in discussing that of ancient times and of the East, while extremely accurate and minute in determining pentatonic and all other scales, and what may be called the mere machinery and history of composition, showed that he was utterly ignorant of the fundamental fact that notes and chords, bars and melodies were in themselves ideas or thoughts. Thus, Confucius is said to have composed a melody which was a personal description of himself. Now, if this be not understood, we cannot understand the soul of early music, and the folklorist who cannot get behind the latter and fancies himself scientific is exactly like the magician who has no idea of how or why melodies were anciently composed. The strange and mystical chapter, How Diana Made the Stars and the Rain, is the same given in my Legends of Florence, but much enlarged or developed to a cosmonic, mythologic sketch. And here a reflection occurs, which is perhaps the most remarkable, which evangelical suggests in all other scriptures of all races. It is the male, Jehovah, Buddha, or Brahma, who creates the universe. In witch sorcery, it is the female who is the primitive principle. Rather, in history, there is a period of radical intellectual rebellion against long-established conservatism, hierarchy, and the like. There is always an effort to regard woman as the fully equal, which means the superior sex. This is the extraordinary war of conflicting elements, strange schools of sorcery, Neoplatonism, Kabbalah, heretic Christianity, Gnosticism, Persian magism, and dualism, which with the remains of old Greek and Egyptian theologies in the 3rd and 4th centuries at Alexandria and the House of Light of Cairo. In the 9th, the equality of women was prominent doctrine. It was Sophia, or Helena, the enfranchised, who was then the true Christ, who was to save mankind. When illumination or illuminism, in company with magic and mysticism, and a resolve to regenerate society according to the extreme free thought, inspired the Templars to hope that they would master the church and the world, the equality of woman derived from the Carrying tradition again received attention, and it may be observed that during the Middle Ages, even so late as the intense excitement which inspired the French Huguenots, the Jansenists, and the Anabaptists, women always came forth more prominently or played a far greater part than she had done in social or political life. This was also the case in the Spiritism founded by the Fox Sisters of Rochester, New York. And it is manifesting itself in many ways in the Fin de Siècle, which is also a nervous chaos according to the Nordu, women being evidently a fish who shows herself most when the waters are troubled. Oh, woman in her hours of ease. And it goes on. So, okay. Here's the thing. It goes on. There's more to this book. For some reason, I thought I was going to get through it a lot quicker than I did, and we didn't. So, here's the thing. Do you want to read the rest of the appendix in Aradia, or do you want to move on to another text? So, here's what you got to do. Like, of course, and comment. Do you want to finish out the appendix in Aradia next weekend, or do you want to move on to a more exciting text? If so, do you want fiction or nonfiction? Are we moving on to the Dove Keepers or something more serious like, I don't know, pick something off the shelf. From the Golden Dawn to you name it, I've got it. Just let me know what you want to read. All right, you guys. Happy summer solstice again. Summer solstice and weekend is almost over. So have a wonderful week. Blessed be.